lesson tonight is Prophecy Alert, the coming geopolitical changes and judgments on the state of Israel and the timing of the Israelite return to the land of Israel, part 2. Hallelujah. Our text is in Isaiah chapter 18, verse 5 through 7, and Isaiah chapter 17. Hallelujah. Tonight we will study part 2 of our research in Isaiah 18, and also look at the scriptures in Isaiah 17 in relation to our topic tonight regarding the fall and judgments of the state of Israel and the timing of the return to the land by the children of Israel coming out of the Babylonian/American captivity. In part 1 of our study in Isaiah 18, we looked at verses 1 through 4. And we're reading from the Septuagint version. Woe to you, you wings of the land of ships, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. He sends messengers by the sea and paper letters on the water, for swift messengers shall go to a lofty nation and to a strange and harsh people who is beyond it, a nation not looked for and trodden down. Now all the rivers of the land shall be inhabited as an inhabited country. Their land shall be as when a signal is raised from a mountain. It shall be audible as the sound of a trumpet. For thus saith Yahweh to me, there shall be security in my city as the light of noonday heat, and it shall be as a cloud of dew in the day of harvest. Now in verses 1 through 4 of Isaiah 18, it states that at the time of the fall of the state of Israel, Yahweh will also be judging America, which is described in verse 1 in the Septuagint version as the land of ships. Now, this land of ships means that in the Hebrew, it means America is located. It means that America is located on the other side of the Ethiopian Ocean, rather than the translation in your Bibles that have beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. And we explained in detail that this is a reference to some things described in the Septuagint version as rivers, referring not only to those channels of water, but also as a reference to oceans of water or huge torrents of water. In our previous lesson, we saw that historic maps from the 1700s called Southeast Atlantic Ocean along the west coast of Africa as being the Ethiopian Ocean. And we still have that map here just to pull up that you can take a look at, because you can actually see the usage of the term Ethiopian Ocean from a map that's dated from 1710. Here you see the word Ethiopian, and up here you see the word ocean. And so we are looking at Isaiah 18 in regards to speaking of a land on the other side of the Ethiopian Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, and that other side would be America. All right. It was to and fro. It was to and fro across the Ethiopian Ocean from America to Africa, that slave ships brought many Hebrews into slavery to America across this ocean, down this stretch of land that had gotten the nickname as the slave coast of Africa. And so therefore the text in verse 1 says of America, woe, because of its coming judgment for what it did to the children of Israel. In the Septuagint text of verse 8, in the time of the judgment on America, Yahweh will send messengers to notify the Israelites in America to return to their homeland, the land of Israel. Hallelujah. Now, in verse 2, in the Septuagint version of chapter 18 of Isaiah, the Israelites are called a strange people. In verse 2, go to a strange people in the Septuagint version of Isaiah 18:2. Now, the word strange here does not mean a weird or an outlandish people. It means people who are strangers in a land not their own. That's speaking of you and I. That is those of us who have ancestry that came through the captivity of slavery to America. As described in the 400-year prophecy in Genesis 15, verse 13, which declared, know for surety, your children shall be strangers in a land not their own. And certainly when it says strangers in a land not their own, it's clearly referring to you and me, the captivity of Israel in the Americas. And this 400-year prophecy in Genesis 15 was fulfilled in 2019, just before the judgment of the COVID. Just before the judgment of the COVID-19 hit America and the world. And so we're in the momentum, we're in line, we're in the process of the fulfilling of the 400-year people that are described in Genesis 15:13, and in the Septuagint of Isaiah chapter 18, verse 2, messengers are sent to us, will be sent to us in the wake of the 400-year fulfillment, notifying us of some things. Now, these messengers, according to verse 3 and 4, and that's where we read, he sends messengers by the sea and paper letters on the water, for swift messengers shall go to a lofty nation and to a strange and harsh people. We are strangers in a land not their own. And it says these messengers will be sent by Yah to notify the Israelites in America that the way is prepared for Israel to return in safety to Jerusalem. And this is why Yah says through the messengers, for thus saith, in verse 4, thus saith Yahweh to me, there shall be security in my city as the light of noonday sun, and shall be as a cloud of dew in the day of harvest, Septuagint version. And a lot of reasons many Israelites are hesitant to come to America, very often it's because to go to Israel is they're afraid of the danger that's there. And certainly there's always surrounding danger. So these messengers will be sent to notify the Israelites that Yah has said, it's safe for you to come there. It's well protected because Yah says, I will protect my city. And I can tell you nothing better than the promises in Psalm 91. Blessed are those who take refuge under the shadow of the wing of the Most High. And that signal to us will be, as it said in verse 3 of the Septuagint, like a signal raised on the mountains of Israel. They'll be very clear and audible, where you won't hesitate, you won't doubt, you won't fear, to understand it's time for you to get up and leave from here and go to the promised land. All right, anybody have any questions or comments before we go further? Anybody got any questions or comments? All right, so the fear and hesitancy regarding Israel, the Most High said he will make it clear, it's safe, you're secure to come to Israel. These messengers will notify us that changes will have taken place there. And that's really at the heart of what we're really going to talk about tonight. What are the changes that are going to take place in the land of Israel that will make it safe and secure for Israelites here in this captivity to come back home? And that the way or the door is open that we can come back and live in the land. And so tonight we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 18, verses 5 through 6. And the Most High is saying, and he's going to explain to us in verses 5 and 6, why it will be safe for Israelites to go to the land and what he will do to make it safe for the Israelites to go back to the land. Because in Isaiah chapter 18, verse 5 through 6, Yahweh tells us that he will bring judgments on the state of Israel. And that's what we're going to look at tonight. And these judgments will be very catastrophic. All right, I'm going to read again from the Septuagint version of Isaiah chapter 18, verse 5 through 6. All right. Isaiah chapter 18, verse 5 through 6. It states, before the reaping time, when the flower has been completely formed, and the upright or the unripe grape has put forth its flower and blossomed, then shall he take away the little clusters with pruning hooks, and shall take away the small branches and cut them down. And he shall leave them together to the birds of the sky and to the wild beasts of the earth, and the fowls of the sky shall be gathered upon them, and all the beasts of the land shall come upon him. Septuagint version of Isaiah chapter 18, verse 5 through 6. Now, the phrase in verse 5, it says, before the reaping time, which means before the harvest time. And things are going to happen to make that land safe. Now, I want us to review what these terms, reaping time or harvest time, mean prophetically in relationship to the land of Israel. And we're going to interpret what reaping time and harvest time means, because the judgments that come on the state of Israel, the prophecy is saying will happen before there's a great reaping and before there's a harvest time. Now, if we understand what reaping and harvest time mean, it prophetically, Yeshua teaches us what that means. Yeshua declared in Matthew chapter 13, verse 38 through 39. And in verse 38 through 39, he says, the field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. Now notice, in verse 39 of Matthew 13, Yeshua says the harvest, which means the time of reaping, that the harvest is the end of the world. So when we read in Isaiah chapter 18 and verse 5, reaping time or harvest time as described in Isaiah 18, verse 5 means, well, Yeshua said it means. It means the time of the end of the world. So when you read Isaiah 18:5, he's saying before the reaping time or harvest time or before the end of the world, that Yah will cut down the state of Israel. And he will return the remnant of the children of Israel to the land at that time. Notice I said return the remnant. I didn't say all of them, just part of us will go back at that time. The remnant will go back at that time. And not all Israelites are the remnant. So we must understand that this notion that all Israelites are just going to go back to the land at that time, before the end, won't happen. But before the end comes, there will be a remnant that will go back. And there's a lot of scriptures to back that up in Isaiah. And so anybody have any questions, comments right now?
Okay, Sleek, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so going with that, when the messengers bring forth the messenger for the remnant, okay, end of the world. So we're taking it at the end of this world order, so to speak, right? Because are they coming previous to what's mentioned in Revelation chapter, I want to say maybe 7, Sleek up on that, where we'll be carried into the wilderness for that time period? Is that previous to this? You know what I mean?
That's a good question. I know exactly what you mean, and I've pondered that myself. And Emma, I have come to see at this point, as I'm looking at that, that because it says before the reaping time, before the harvest time, which is the end of the world, that means this is an event where the remnant come back before the end of the world happens. When we say end of the world, as you said, end of the world means also the world system.
This system we're under. Okay, so when we see this Exodus out and we're going into the wilderness where we're going to be nourished for 3.5 years, that's where I was just trying to figure that part out.
Yes, yes. Now, I'm glad you bring that up. And the remnant will not go to the wilderness.
Oh, okay.
The remnant will not go to the wilderness. The ones that were not in the remnant, they will go to the wilderness, because when you read chapter 20 of Ezekiel, you'll see that the reason why Israelites go to the remnant is because they've been hard-headed and disobedient. And Yah brings them there to judge them face to face.
Okay.
You know, so what it means is that something wasn't right with the understanding they had, or truth they should have had and didn't walk with, or it's something that was missing.
So you know what?
It's like reform school.
So you know what, Elder Dawid? So like with the first Exodus, right? Remember that remnant, they had to go walk around for 40 years because of, excuse me 1 second.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Because of, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Okay, so when they came out the first time, and you know, there was only supposed to be like a journey for a week, but the Most High had them do that 40-year wilderness because of, I guess, their disobedience. So you're saying this is the same repeat?
Right. In fact, he makes in chapter 20 of Ezekiel, he describes that it would be just like you said, a repeat of the experience of the wilderness of our forefathers, where because of their disobedience and stubbornness, he made them go through the wilderness for 40 years. Now, in this case, there's a twofold process where there's a remnant that goes to the land, but don't go to the wilderness. But then there's a time where the remnant that's in the land, according to Revelation chapter 12, verse 5,
Mm-hmm.
they will be snatched out or teleportated to the throne of Yah in heaven. The ones that remain of Israel in the world, they won't be snatched up to heaven, but they will be sent to the wilderness of the people. And that's explained quite well in Revelation 12,
Mm-hmm.
where it says, let me go there, verse 5 and 6. Notice it says in Revelation 12, verse 5, it says, and she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to Elohim and to his throne. So we understand that the man-child there is really a representation of the 144,000 in chapter 14, verse 1, where the 144,000 are seen in heaven before the throne of Yah in verse 3. Now, this is the pure doctrine church or pure doctrine congregation of the Nazarene teachings that had understood the pure teachings. Their time will be in the land for a moment, then they're snatched out of the land because of disobedience in the land.
So Elder W, when they're in the land, 144, they're going to be setting up the kingdom. I mean, not the kingdom, the ruling, the ruling Knesset.
Yes, they will. And I did some really good study this weekend about the 144,000 concept in ancient Hebrew Nazarene messianic thought. And these are the ones described in chapter 14 as being virgin because their doctrine is pure. But they will be empowered to set up kingdom government in the land of Israel. Particularly as we read in chapter 18 of Isaiah, they will go there, they will be able to establish kingdom government. But because of the disobedience of Israelites living in the land, Yah will separate them out of the land, bring them to heaven. I see Yalamit has her hand up. Yalamit, shalom.
Shalom, family. I apologize. I'm trying to work my phone. So I'm sorry if I'm reiterating the same question. I apologize, but I just want to make sure I understand what is being said. So, Elder, are you saying that the remnant? Well, let me ask this question: Are the remnant the same as the 144,000?
Yes.
Okay.
The remnant is the 144,000.
Okay, so the 144,000, you're saying that the 144,000 are not going to be taken into the wilderness? They are not?
They're not going to the wilderness, they're going to the land. They would have already been deemed fit to go to the land because they have the pure doctrine. The people that go to the wilderness, they were not deemed fit because of rebellion, stubbornness, just like their forefathers, like our forefathers. We're not fit to go into the land because of rebellion and stubbornness. In fact, in chapter 20 of Ezekiel, where it talks about the wilderness of the people, it says here, in verse 35, I will bring you into the wilderness of the people, and there will I plead with you face to face, like as I pleaded with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt. So will I plead with you, saith Yah, and I will cause you to pass under the rod, and will bring you into the bond of the covenant. So, passing under a rod is a chastening process.
Okay, this is a different understanding for me because I've always been under the belief that the 144,000 are the ones that are going to be taken away into the wilderness for the 3.5 years to be taught the
Mhm.
correct way and to be taught how to set up the government, and that they are going to be the ones that are hidden. And after that time period, so this is
Uh-huh.
new
Yes.
doctrine to me. This new doctrine,
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
to me.
if we look in chapter 12, and thank you all so much. I'm glad you bring these questions up. We need to go over these things. Chapter 12, verse 9, or chapter 12, verse 5 of Revelation. We must understand that the man-child represents the 144,000. That's a symbolic reference to the 144,000 who are called in Isaiah 66, verse 8, the children of Zion. And the original mother congregation, or the original congregation that the apostles were in Acts 1 and 2, they felt that their congregation, where the upper room was actually the throne of the kingdom. They felt the throne of the kingdom of Yah was in their midst because of Yahshua. And that the authority of the throne of Yahshua is in our midst. That's why when they ask Yahshua, show us the kingdom, he says, in your midst. Because where his rulership is established, where his seat of authority is established, is in the body of his people. And so they understood that so much that the first bishops of that congregation in Jerusalem, in the book of Acts, they only initially chose bishops that were descendants of the house of David, because they believed the Davidic throne is located in their congregation. And in fact, when you go to Jerusalem, as Emma Deborah have been there many times, when you go to the place where this early Nazarene church or assembly or congregation was located, where the upper room was, right next to it is the tomb of David. That's how serious they were in their commitment to believe that in their group was the throne of David, because their group was started by the king of the house of David, Yeshua himself. And this is why Yeshua said to them, I give you the keys of the kingdom, which is telling them that your congregation are the managers of the true government of Israel. This is why this is so important, that a Nazarene congregation is emerging here in this captivity in America now, among us right now as we speak, because this is the re-emergence of the place of the throne of Yeshua in our midst. And it is that remnant that band together around that go to the land. Now, they have the pure understanding about him. And we got several sources to break that down, what it means about the pure understanding from ancient Nazarene sources, because before they were called Christians, they were called Nazarene. They never wanted to be called Christian. And also they observed the commandments. They kept the feast days, the laws. They kept those and had the testimony of Yeshua. So this is a resumption of that right now among us as we speak, that Yah is raising up a remnant that he's preparing right now. They won't need to go to the wilderness, but then not all in Israel will want to connect to the pure teaching. And I can tell you, there's a book that I've been reviewing this week of all the different camps of doctrine that were in Israel in the time of Yeshua and the apostles. And it's strange that I see all those same camps of doctrine among Israelites in America right now. And when I see that, then I realize, okay, we have to be very astute and sure that we're holding on to the right teaching. because that can determine whether we go to the wilderness or whether we go to the land. That's really basically, the answer I got for that. Is there any question that you have any more in regards to that?
You asking me, Elder, or?
I'm just asking anybody at large, anybody?
Yeah, I got.
Oh, yes, Ron, go ahead, Doc.
No, I'm just was trying to show them that in Ezekiel 20 and 39 and Revelation the 144, the passage in Ezekiel 20 is not talking about the 144. So when you read it, it says, and ye shall not pollute my holy name no more with your gifts and your idols. But when you read about the 144 in Revelation 14, it says they're without guile. So it's not talking about the same group of Israelites.
Absolutely.
And it's saying that he's going to purge out in Ezekiel 20, he's going to purge out the rebels, meaning those Israelites that you may have been an Israelite leader misleading somebody else, but they were just under the assumption that that was the correct doctrine, but they still got to go to the wilderness. And the Most High said, I'm going to purge out the rebels from among this group.
All right.
Those who don't want to hearken. But there are innocent people who just don't study enough and they just was following somebody else. So once they go through that chastening process, they're gonna say, okay, this is the right doctrine, and Yah will preserve them. But those that don't want to hearken, they're not gonna make it.
So there will be a remnant that comes out of the wilderness too.
Okay, but my question is, if there's going to be a group of folks that are not teaching the correct doctrine, then they're teaching a false doctrine. So you're saying that those people are going to have to be corrected instead of punished?
Well, they're going to go to the wilderness. They're going to have time to learn better. Y'all, like when you read Revelation 12, verse 5.
Then wouldn't that be
6,
Christians?
Yeah, that'd be some of them too. When you read Revelation 12, verse 5 and 6, notice it says, she brought forth a man child. Now that's the remnant, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto Elohim and to his throne. Okay, now that's the remnant that goes to the land first. And after roughly about 3 years or so, because conditions will become corrupt in the land, they will be snatched out. And the Israelites that are either in the land or even way over here, Yah will bring them over. It says in verse 6, and the woman fled into the wilderness, which she had prepared of Elohim, that they should feed her 1,260 days. That's another 3.5 years. And those are the ones in verse 17 of chapter 12, the ones in the wilderness, that there's a remnant that will emerge in the wilderness, that will come into the truth. And the dragon will be angry with the woman, it says in verse 17, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, that is the rest of her seed. So this is like a second remnant right there in verse 17. And they're coming out of the wilderness, and they keep the commandments of Elohim and have the testimony of Yeshua. And the whole time they're in the wilderness, Yah will protect them. They will be, but he will be dealing with them there. He'll protect them, but it's like how families used to talk years ago. You can whoop on your family, but your family ain't gonna let nobody else whoop on you.
Right.
But it's gonna be whooping on his children, but he's not gonna let nobody else whoop on his children. So the devil won't be able to get in there.
Ezekiel 20 is good because for the Israelites, because what Yahshua said is, if the blind lead the blind, they both fall into a ditch. So that's the way Yahshua is saving those Israelites that have been misled, because a lot of people get misled and they live that whole lifestyle with that understanding.
Right.
But Yahshua is using that the wilderness purging to save the sincere Israelites. There's sincere people that just don't really study, and they just watch videos and follow man. They don't study for themselves. So he still got a plan for you. You know, if you can make it, you know, if you accept the pure doctrine, and he'll purge and remove you from those who ain't gonna make it. So it's still a plan of effect, just in case you stuck somewhere, but you're sincere.
Hallelujah. All right, well, I'm gonna move on unless anybody else had any other questions. All right, so we're gonna talk about before all these good things can come, be like a remnant going to the land. There's a big obstacle in our way. It's called the state of Israel. And we just read that in Isaiah 18:5, that Yah says, before the harvest time, which is the end of the world, when Yah just cut off the wicked everywhere. Before that happens, that Yahweh in 18:5 of Isaiah will cut down the state of Israel. And he will return the remnant of the children of Israel to the land at that time. Now, the description of cutting down the state of Israel before the harvest means they will be cut down before Israel reaches their full power of dominance. Like in 2019, last time I went to Israel, that was the most lucrative year in terms of tourist money they ever had. There was all kind of hope alive that Israel, the land of Israel, was going to become the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. They were making treaties with Arab countries that had oil, and they were making treaties with places like Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Qatar, and these other countries there, the Emirates, where it's like oil for technology. Israel had the technology, those countries had the oil and money to finance it. They were really looking at really becoming a mighty power economically. And then all of a sudden, just like that, COVID shut them down, where it shut down their tourist trade. So their tourist money wasn't coming in Israel. Emma Patel and I remember that one, because we were both planning to be there in 2020 until this COVID came up. And a group of us were planning to be there in 2020. Well, then all of a sudden, all of their plans through Donald Trump shut down when he was beat. He was their main guy for setting up things through his son-in-law, for setting up all kind of business arrangements. So they really were at the peak of what they thought was going to be great. Instead of being at their peak, they came to something that was bleak, a shutdown, a global economic shutdown because of COVID-19. All right, so their fall is described in verse 5 in Isaiah 18 as cutting down a crop before it has fully matured. Now, this is an unusual farming technique. Farmers don't cut down a crop before it has matured. They always wait to cut it down when it's as matured as possible. But in this case, Yah is saying just as they are about to reach their full power of dominance, Yah will start chopping them down. And it's already starting. And this is how Yah will judge them. All right. Now, in verse 6, Yah described that he will cause them a mass casualty event on the state of Israel that will leave bodies everywhere, where the scavenger animals of the earth and sky will scavenge them. Because verse 6 says, he will leave them together to the birds of the sky and to the wild beasts of the earth, and the fowls of the sky shall be gathered unto them, and all the beasts of the land shall come upon them. So verse 6 is describing a mass casualty event. So the question is, what is the event that Yah will use to cause this devastation on the state of Israel? Because it's about to happen, saints. And according to Isaiah 17, this devastation of the state of Israel will be caused by a war in Syria that has already begun. Let me repeat that again. the mass casualty event that will cause the absolute fall of the state of Israel will be because of a war in Syria that has already started. And this is chapter 17 of Isaiah. I talked with Emma Patel. She had some visions and thoughts on this that we both had talked about and discussed, and it's very well on the way. Now, this war in Syria that we see current, where it's a tit for tat kind of war, where Israel bombs a few places here and there in Syria, and then they shoot missiles back at Israel through surrogates like either the Palestinians down in Gaza or from across the border in Syria or even from Lebanon. Okay, so this war in Syria will eventually escalate beyond that. And it will escalate so much, it will cause the fall of the state of Israel. Now, this escalating war that will cause the fall of the state of Israel will result in the total destruction of Damascus. It will result in the total destruction of the capital of Syria, which is Damascus, which is the oldest surviving city of the world. Damascus has never been destroyed. It has existed since ancient biblical times. Yet the war in Isaiah 17 describes Damascus' total destruction as a city. But also in the midst of the Syrian war, the state of Israel's government will also be cut off, as described in Isaiah 18, verse 5 and 6. So I'm gonna read from the ancient Aramaic Targum text. That's in, I'm gonna read chapter 17, verse 1 through 3 from the ancient Targum text, which is a very old Targum. This Targum means translation. It was a translation from Hebrew into Aramaic because when the Israelites came back from ancient Babylon, they were speaking more Aramaic that they had learned to speak in Babylon than they were actually Hebrew. And so the common people needed to know and understand the Bible from the current vernacular they had at the time when they came back from ancient Babylon. And so the text that was translated into Aramaic is called a Targum, meaning in Aramaic, a translation. So I'm gonna read from that, from one of the best translators in the history of Israelite translators in ancient times. His name was Jonathan ben Uziel's translation. Now, he was a great scribe. He lived about 70 years before Yeshua, but a lot of his translation is what is behind a lot of concepts in the New Testament, in the early Nazarene teaching of the New Testament. Now, it says in verse 1, these three verses, verse 1 and through 3, in Jonathan ben Uziel's Targum, the burden of the cup of cursing to give Damascus to drink. Behold, Damascus is removed, so as to be no more a kingdom, and it shall be a city laid waste. Their cities are deserted, they are laid waste, they shall be for dwelling places for flocks of sheep. They shall lie down, and none shall make them to move away. Verse 3, the government shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of the solitary ones from Syria, and their glory shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, said Yahweh of hosts. Now, what it's saying is, if the government shall cease from Ephraim, which was one of the tribes of Israel, he's saying also the government of Syria will cease and will be as the glory of the children of Israel. That is, it will cease from being, just like the government of Israel will cease. So the government here of Israel is called Ephraim. That's something I want to talk with y'all about. Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
Real quick, so did you just say that Syria could get canceled out? Because I was thinking that would be something the Most High get rid of, because Syria is our land as well, like with
Hallelujah.
Iran
right.
and Iraq. So he could cancel both of them out.
Yep, That's right.
Is that what that,
That's what
right?
it's saying. It's saying that when Damascus is destroyed, so will the Zionist state be destroyed.
Because according to what the scripture says, that land, is that Canaan, pretty much?
Oh, well, you know, that's the land that he did promise Abraham
He
to
did.
his seed. That Syria is part of it. And so is Lebanon.
And what about
Mm-hmm.
Iraq? Is that
Yeah,
border?
all the way to the Euphrates in Iraq. That's our easternmost boundary, is the Euphrates River. Our westernmost boundary is the Nile River in
Okay.
Egypt. So part of Egypt will belong to us. So all that's going to be ours. That's and we will be in the midst of all of that. We can read Isaiah 19 for more details on that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's coming, just like you saying. And
Mhm.
the Aramaic Targum text of Isaiah 17:3 says, it calls the current Zionist government of the state of Israel Ephraim. Now, a lot of people say, well, you got to look in history to see the fulfillment of this. There is no history or a time when the capital of Syria, Damascus, was destroyed. It has never been destroyed. So when you read that section, you're reading about something in the future, because Damascus has never been destroyed as a city. Ever since biblical times, it has not been destroyed. So then you can't relegate, as so many translators, interpreters do, try to relegate this to the time of history. Because Damascus was never destroyed historically or current, not yet. And so when you talk about there's a government in Israel called the government of Ephraim, we got to look at why is the government of the state of Israel, based on Jonathan ben Uziel's Targum text, it's one of the best Targum translations of the scriptures from Hebrew to Aramaic that you'll ever find. He was renowned as the greatest of all of the scribes. And much of what you see and understand from what Yeshua taught and said, a lot of it is from that translation and interpretation that the apostles taught from, a lot of it. You may want to look into some more research about Jonathan ben Uziel. He lived 70 years before Yeshua did, and you can Google him. But now he's saying in his translation, but also in the actual Hebrew text itself, that the fortress of Ephraim, I think that's what he calls it in your King James Version, but in the Targum, he has the word government. Now, in the time when Jonathan ben Uziel lived, the tribe of Ephraim was one of the 10 lost tribes. It was still lost by all accounts, for the most part. There was some, maybe that understood some parts of it, but for the most part, most of it was lost. And so why is it then in the latter days, there's a country, our land is ruled by a government called Ephraim. So we're going to look at that. This is important because most Israelites tend to call the government of Israel Edomites, the heathen, the Khazars, or just outright Gentiles. It's never anything good, mostly the Israelites call the government, the Zionist government of the state of Israel at all. But in the ancient scribe translation of this verse, it calls this government Ephraim. And based on what we read also in the other translations, Isaiah calls them Ephraim also. It's important that we really take time to really understand this, because what does it mean that the current state of Israel is called Ephraim? And we're going to look at something, I'm going to show it to you. In Israel's ancient history, sometimes the northern kingdom of Israel was called Ephraim. All right, you remember Israel broke into two parts after Solomon. The southern part was called Judah. The northern part was called Israel, and the leading tribe was Ephraim. So sometimes the northern kingdom was called Ephraim. just like the southern kingdom was named Judah. So when we look in Israel's ancient history, there is a latter-day prophecy in Ezekiel 37, verse 16 about Ephraim. And we need to look at that in verse 16. It says, moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. Now notice, Ephraim is the tribe that represented and led the northern kingdom of the house of Israel, which comprised 10 tribes of Israel. But we also see that Ephraim had companions. Who are these companions? Well, the word for companion in this verse is rooted in the Hebrew word kwabah or kabah. That's in Strong's 2266. You can look it up there, look this word up for companions. It means to have fellowship with or to be in league with something or somebody, which means it's implying that other people outside of Israel align themselves with the tribe of Ephraim. That means Ephraim had, Hosea 7:8 said, Ephraim hath mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned. All right, so a cake in ancient Israelite time meant something like a pancake on a griddle. If the cake is not turned over, the cake looks white like dough. So Ephraim mixed himself socially and biologically with white people in Eurasia, till he now looks mostly white. Also, the people that Ephraim mixed with also joined in league and fellowship with his tribe. So these companions of Ephraim would be the Gentile converts that have joined in his midst. Today, we would call these people the Ashkenazi. Nearly 0.2%, 0.2%, and I've seen the charts on this, 0.2% of Ashkenazi Jews can be traced to ancient Hebrew Israelite E1B1A bloodlines. And also nearly 20% can be traced to the Middle Eastern haplogroup E1B1B, which is another subclad of the E haplogroup of the ancient Israelites. So the E1B1A and E1B1B, there's a lot of talk about differentiation between the two, but that's more complicated than I can deal with right now. But among the Ashkenazi, 80% of them are mostly white converts to Ephraim, as well as converts to the 10 tribes of Israel that were scattered into Eurasia by the Assyrians in 720 BC. Now you can look in 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 6, and you can see the places where Ephraim was scattered and where he began to mix himself with Caucasian people. And so that today, there among this Caucasian apparatus of people called Ashkenazi, about 80% of them have no bloodline whatsoever to Israel or anywhere in the Middle East. That's a fact. That's a fact there. But go ahead, Emma.
Speak at Elder W. You must have been in my thought, because I was just going to ask, Ephraim did something to where the Most High said he was going to be cursed and lose that bloodline. I can't remember what book. I'm not sure if it was Chronicles, but he did. They did something, and they were going to be no more.
Yeah. In fact, Ephraim's not mentioned in the 144,000.
Right. That's what I thought it was. Dan. No.
And Dan wasn't either.
But
See,
they, I can't remember. Do you remember what they did? That the Most High,
both of them
I know Ephraim
were
did
known
something
for idolatry, for bringing idolatry into Israel. That was one thing. They were known because it was from Ephraim that one of their kings married this horrible Canaanite woman named Jezebel.
bad. Mm.
You know, I mean, there's a record of them setting up golden calves in different parts of Israel rather than going to worship Yah in Jerusalem.
But I guess my point is those Khazars that are over there now are not bloodline of Abraham.
Here's the thing about it. Isaiah calls the government, the people there, Ephraim, but when you read Ezekiel, you have Ephraim, then you have his companions. The companions would be the 80% of the Jewish people over there that are not any way connected to ancient Israel. But among them, there's about 0.2% of them that are connected with Judah, with you and me. They have E1B1A. But then there's another part of them, about, almost 20% of them that are not connected with Judah, but more than likely with the other 10 tribes. Because see, when you read in the book of Kings, if you look at where the 10 tribes were scattered, in 2 Kings chapter 16 and verse, well, not 16, but chapter 17 and verse 6. I'm sorry, I keep saying 16, I meant 17 and 6. It says, in the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried away Israel into Assyria and placed them in Hala, Habar, by the river Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. Now the Medes, Habar, Hala, these are places moving up around Armenia, Georgia, the Caucasus Mountain areas. And this is where the Assyrians moved them. Some of them actually were able to get back to the land. And there's a group of them there in the land now called Samaritans. They're called Samaritans because that was the capital. All of those priests in that tribe called the Samaritans in northern Israel now, they are all E haplogroup, even though the rest of the Samaritans are not, because the other peoples that came in were not Israelites. But then they got to the land, and according to this account in chapter 17 of 2 Kings, the land started killing these people, and they begged that some Israelite priest would come there and teach them how to live for Yah in the land, because the land was killing them with lions. And to make a long story short, the Assyrians sent back some of the Israelites to teach them how to live in the land. And so those Israelites that came back to teach, those foreigners the Assyrians had put there to replace the Israelites, those Israelites that came back became the priestly clan of the Samaritans, even to this day. And they all have, the priestly group has E haplogroup like you and I do among us, and so that they're related to us, but the rest of the Samaritans don't have our bloodline. And so likewise with the Ephraimites, they were northern tribe. We were Judah, southern tribe. So, we got we got brother type haplogroups within E. The Judah is primarily E1B1A. That's what 85% of the so-called African-American is. And even now, grudgingly, many of the geneticists in the Middle East are acknowledging this. They understand they can't cover this up no more. I mean, it's scientific. They tried to use DNA to disprove us. All they did was they opened up the door to prove us and disprove themselves, because they don't have it. They don't have it. So, and then the small smidgen of them that got it, you ought to see how jealously those who got E haplogroup among them are jealously guarding their E haplogroup connection because they know most of the people who call themselves Jews don't have that, because that's an ancient haplogroup for ancient Israel, and the DNA they got for these modern Jewish people, it doesn't go that far back. It's not traceable that far back to the Middle East, and so it's quite a thing to see. Okay, well, the scriptures tell us state of Israel is a combination of a little nucleus of actual Israelite bloodlines. They may not look like you and me now because they've been mixed so much. But you know, DNA don't change because your skin color changed. It don't change. Skin color doesn't change your DNA. So there's a very minute few of them that got actual ancient Israelite. But over 80% of them don't have any whatsoever. So we want to distinguish that to understand why it says that Ephraim had companions in verse 16 of Ezekiel 37. All right. And so Ephraim mixed himself socially and biologically. So 80% of Ashkenazim are mostly white converts to Ephraim and the other tribes that were scattered into Eurasia. So it's from this assortment of white converts mixed with Ephraim who comprise the Zionist state of Israel. This is why Isaiah chapter 17:3 calls them either the fortress of Ephraim, or in Jonathan ben Uziel's Targum text, it's the government of Ephraim. See, the capital of Ephraim and the 10 tribes in the northern kingdom of Israel was Samaria, just like the capital of the southern tribes of the kingdom of Judah was Jerusalem. All right, and even after the exile of the 10 tribes, along with Ephraim in 720 BC by the Romans, sometimes all of the 10 tribes, including Ephraim, are called Samaria. All right, Ezekiel 16:53 says Samaria's captivity would come back to the land before Judah. Now this is interesting. The Ephraimites are supposed to be back in the land before we get there. Ezekiel chapter 16 verse 53 says, when I shall bring again their captivity, the captivity of Sodom and her daughters, and the captivity of Samaria and her daughters, then I will bring again the captivity of thy captives in the midst of them. That is, Judah comes back last. and you got to read chapter 16 why Yah did that, because he said Judah should have seen the way the wickedness Ephraim did caused them to be judged so hard, but Judah, like a fool, turned around and acted worse than they did.
But on that same note, when that passage, I never knew who the daughters of
Samaria.
Right, I never knew who they were.
Yeah, that was the capital of the northern tribes. So, and Ephraim was the dominant of the northern tribes. And they did crazy stuff, but then Yah says Judah turned around and acted worse. So he said, on us, I'm gonna bring them back first.
But that's why we caught the worst of the captivity here in America.
Yep.
They didn't go through what we went through.
No.
They're over there. They didn't get sold on that auction block and get rich like you did. We got it back.
Yep. This is because Yah was really upset with us because, you know, to whom much is given, much is required. Mm-hmm. He gave Judah the kingdom.
He gave him the scepter.
He gave us the scepter. Mm-hmm. He didn't give that to Ephraim.
Mm-mm. No.
So you see, when you read chapter 16 of Ezekiel, Yah is saying, before you come back, remnant of Judah, out of Babylon, Ephraim's Some of Ephraim's going to be in the land, but he's going to have a lot of companions, converts that are with him, that aren't even Israelites. And yet, Yah addresses them through his word as Ephraim. Now, this is a Yah thing, and I can't argue with why he does things as he does, but this is what he has decided to do. He said he did this to make us humble, Judah, that is. He said, because verse 54 of chapter 16 of Ezekiel says, that thou mayest bear thine own shame and mayest be confounded in all thou hast done, and that thou art a comfort unto them. So they can look at us and say, yeah, we've been bad, but look at them Negroes over there. How bad they at. So,
well, the Most High said we would be as taken of the head. They would look at us and be taken of the head because they know who we are.
yep. Yeah, they know. They know.
And how foolish our ancestors. I mean, it's the same when you read about it. All you want to do is close the book and cry because you can't understand it.
Yep. That's a good point, Ema. And so when it says, verse 55, when thy sister Simon and her daughters shall return to their former estate, and Samaria and her daughters shall return to their former estate. Well, Samaria's estate is the state of Israel. They're going to be there before you get back. The government of Ephraim is their former estate. They're the ones running the land now. But they're getting ready to go down because Yah says, though, then thou and thy daughters. Now he's talking to Judah and Jerusalem here. Then thou and thy daughters shall return to your former estate. So when we return, we don't come back as beggars, we come back as rulers of the whole land. We return to our former estate because the throne, the scepter is out of Judah. And the scepter will never depart from Judah. That's what Jacob said. The scepter shall never depart from Judah. Yet we have to really analytically look at the reality that we can't call all of those people over there. One particular thing is most of us are doing, they're probably mixed with all those different kind of peoples, like the Khazars and the Edomites. I'm sure that's the case. However, they collectively represent Ephraim and his fellows or his companions that have rallied around him. All right, so in Ezekiel 16:53 through 55, Samaria comes back into the land before we do. And they are certainly in the land now, but they and their government of the state of Israel, according to Isaiah 17:3 and Isaiah 18:5 through 6, will fall horribly. I mean, absolutely, they're getting ready to fall horribly. It'll be worse than whatever Hitler did to them. I'm here to tell you, they're going to have something worse than what Hitler did to them. Get ready to happen there. What were you saying, Ema?
Okay, now I've heard, I don't want to call camp, but I could say that for lack of a better term. Say that them over there is Black. And because of what they did, you know, back in ancient times, the Most High hates them. So are they supposed to be
Ema, you were fading in and out. I heard just once every other word from
you. Did you hear me?
I hear you better now.
I put the phone close.
Mm-hmm.
The Most High hated them for what they did back in
Still having problems, technical difficulties there. But I think I know what you're saying, though.
But I'm just saying, are they considered Amalek as well? Or is that, what is Amalek?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're getting ready to go into a worse Holocaust than they had in Germany, because this war in Syria will leave only a remnant of survivors among them. In fact, Isaiah 17:4 through 10 says of the survivors of the devastation of the state of Israel, that they will be like gleaning left over after the reaping of a harvest. You remember when Israelites would harvest, they would always leave a few shrubs, you know, for the poor and the destitute. They were called gleanings. Well, whatever is left there from this war in Syria, it's only going to be a very small group of them that will be like gleanings in a great harvest. And it reads in verse 4 of chapter 17, and in that day it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. And it shall be when the harvestman gathereth the corn and reapeth the ears with his arms, it shall be as he that gathereth ears in the valley of Rephaim. The valley of Rephaim is a very fertile area in Israel. And I mean, stuff grows so good there in that spot. Because most of the land of Israel is desert, like dry and arid. That spot right there, the Valley of Rephaim, that's kind of like, you know, like places like in California where they grow grapes and all that. Very lush and fertile. But when the harvest time comes, they hire the Mexican immigrants in California to get as much as they can. And because there's so much fertility there, so much lush agriculture. And that's the case the way Yah's described how he's going to take out the state of Israel and that nation. Is it will be chopped down like ripe vegetation. And then he says, verse 6, yet gleaning grapes shall be left in it, as the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the uppermost bough, 4 or 5 in the outmost fruitful branches. Saith Yah Elohim of Israel, at that day shall a man look to his maker, and his eyes shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel. Now this is a horrifying day that's coming on the state of Israel before we come. And it says it will be so horrifying. Whatever or whoever is actually among them actual Israelite people, they will stop looking to their altars, because in Judaism, with Kabbalah and Zohar, they actually do engage in worship of Asherah and other pagan deities. They do. Even now, even though they cloak it as Judaism, they call on Ashtaroth. In the Kabbalah, they call on Ashtaroth. They call on these ancient, because the word here, altars, is in the Hebrew, it means Ashtaroth, which is the nature goddess. These people do worship these things. They do it in cloaked language in their mysticism. They won't be looking to that Kabbalah and Zoharism. You and I know some people that studied this, that tried to get some of us to convert to Judaism to study it too. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. They had to study this stuff to become citizens of Israel. They said, well, I'm not going to use it. I just studied. Yeah, but you signed a paper saying that you studied this garbage. And these people got, it's just witchcraft. It's the same stuff from ancient times. They just got a cloak with a 6-pointed star around it.
But you know, Elder, this is the history of what we come from. Our forefathers and foremothers did the same thing every single time. They kept going into a different idolatry doing this witchcraft.
Yep. So is the case here. It's the same thing. Because the star on that flag is a witchcraft symbol called a hexagram. That's witchcraft. Judaism is nothing but the hiding place of satanic pagan worship. That's all it is. So this devastation that's coming, those who survive, which will be only gleanings of them, they're not going to look to Judaism at this point. This is going to shock a lot of them. And then also verse 9, in that day his strong cities shall be as a forsaken bow and an uppermost branch, which they left because of the children of Israel. There shall be desolation. So that means those cities like Tel Aviv, Dimona, Haifa, these cities like Tiberias and Beersheba, and these modern cities all over the land of Israel, the scriptures say they will be knocked down. Why? Verse 10, because thou hast forgotten the Elohim of thy salvation, has not been mindful of the rock of thy strength. That's Yahshua. Therefore, that is, they had no plan to have any recognition of Yeshua. Therefore, it says, thou shalt plant pleasant plants and shalt set it with strange slips. Verse 11, in the day shalt thou make thy plant to grow. In the morning thou shalt make thy seed to flourish. But the harvest shall be a heap in the day of grief and desperate sorrow. So that's where it connects with Isaiah 18, verse 5 and 6, where it describes their fall like a harvest before the harvest or before the end.
No, it's more of a process that got to come. This particular Babylon, we gotta have this track. So many things seem like gotta come into it for destruction here first. For like it seems like this could be possible. I don't know if we have time. I mean, I don't know if I got that kind of time to at the most I say this. But I'm just saying, like a process. Like when we read about the first captivity of Mitzrayim, it took a process to happen. You know what I'm saying? It took like some time.
Yeah, well, time is running out.
I mean, it's not like around the corner is what my point.
Yeah. And they see they're cut down when they're thinking they're at the brink of their dominance. And they don't realize
the brink of what? The brink of
they're going to be cut down when they think they're at the brink or the peak of their dominance.
Well, that's how the Most High do move.
Yeah.
When you think it's all peaches and cream, that's when he comes and cut off all your.
Yep. And that's what he's doing. So verse 9 describes how there's strong cities like Dimona and Tel Aviv and Haifa will be destroyed. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show y'all something to close this study out of something in the news that shows that all this that we just read in chapter 17 has already been set in motion to happen. The Iranians have served notice to the Israelis that they got all the cities of Israel targeted with their missiles. I'm going to show you this. It's a short clip from the Tehran Times. All right, check this out.
Is tense, and that is why Israel is constantly speaking about striking in Iran. We heard the messages coming from Defense Minister Benny Gantz, who visited Washington last week, basically passing the message that Israel is ready to act, maybe even on its own. And these messages are echoing in Israel, in the US, and also in Iran. And then they publish this map. We should look at this map on two different levels. The first level, do we really need this map to know that the Iranians know exactly where Tel Aviv is, where Jerusalem is, where Haifa is, or where Beersheba is? No, we didn't know the map. They know exactly they know their geography very, very well. This map, are there so many interesting sites on route number 10, for example, which runs right along the Egyptian border? Probably not. Are there such very interesting Israeli sites inside Jenin or inside the city of Nablus, both of them in the West Bank as shown in the map? Probably not. Does that mean we should undermine this? Absolutely not. The Iranians are what they're basically saying with this article, which is in English, to make sure everybody in Israel is almost everybody in Israel is able to read this. It's not in Farsi; it comes in English. The Iranians are saying loud and clear, we are able to hit any point in Israel, and that is correct. Maybe not the Iranians themselves, But Hezbollah, right on our northern border, they have the ability to do it. And that is what this article is saying. Again, did we really need this to know that the Iranians are well aware of where things are located in Israel? It's not exactly a big secret. You can log on to Google and find out those things. But the Iranians are saying a message. You're threatening us. You're saying you're able to hit us. We are able to hit you just as much. And let's remember, Israel is far, far smaller than Iran.
Jonathan Rega, thanks for breaking down the latest here. Obviously, a topic we follow closely here at I-24 News.
I want us to look at that map. Now, I mean, now this was in the Iranian Times.
These are saying loud and
Hold up. Okay, you see all these red dots? These red dots are where all the major cities are in Israel. Iran, in their newspaper, the Tehran Times, said, if Israel ever thinks about attacking them, they got all these city sites marked out with accurate missiles to wipe out.
Can you send the link? Can you send the link for that? Can you send out the link?
Yeah, in fact,
for that, please?
look in your email. This link is in the email that I sent to all of you.
Okay, Toda.
Yeah, you scroll all the way to the bottom part of the these notes that I'm reading from tonight. You have all of this, and scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll have the link to click into this. But this is lining up with Isaiah 17 very much, and it's already coming to view. Anybody have any questions or comments before we close out?
So possibly if Tehran is going to take care of Israel, Russia going to take care of daughter Babylon. Oh, well.
Well, I hope y'all, I'm looking forward to him, and some of y'all can make it this Saturday. We're going to be starting for the next 2 weeks our study on Revelation 17 and Revelation 18 about how America is going to go down. And what we want, I pray that, and if you can't make it, I'll still be sending the notes out so you can review it, whether you can make it or not. But we will, open the floor for some questions, because taking out Mother Babylon is something. And we're going to talk about that more this Shabbat, for the next 2 Shabbats, Yah willing, for chapters 17 and 18 of Revelation. And we're laying out the details about that, because it gives, those chapters give us the timing of when this country goes down. There's a timing for this country also. We just saw the last time we covered chapter 16 of Revelation, that America will be the last nation that Yah will take down in the earth.
Right, because just the last point I want to make, they are really trying their best to prolong. They trying to fight prophecy. Listening, gleaming at some of the news articles, not on CNN or MSNBC, no, never. But they're really trying to circumvent it, because they read the book. Yeah. And that's why I said, well, you know what, these people are really trying their best to prolong it. But the Most High is a man of war. He's a strategic war plan.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's like you said, Emma. And I sent you all some notes from the last lesson that I did a couple of weeks ago in Revelation 16. Look at those notes that I emailed you on that. You'll see that chapter 16 closes out with the decree by Yah to bring America into his remembrance, to destroy. And it's connected with a prophecy in Jeremiah 25, where it calls America Shishak. It calls Babylon Shishak. There's a couple of places where it calls Babylon that. And the word Shishak has something to do with the number 6. When you take 6 as a multiple for the city of New York, there's the city of Babylon, and then there's the land of Babylon. The city of Babylon is New York City. The land of Babylon is America. And if you take New York City, each letter based on a multiple of sixes. A being 6, B being 12, C being 18. And you just go all the way from A to Z with multiples of 6. You take each letter of the word New York, and you'll find that it all adds up to 666. I'm here to tell you, New York is the Babylon city. I know a lot want to be Jerome and all, but the scriptures give us the clarity on what it is. And this is where that statue of that woman is.
So are they trying to get as many as us can? I mean, as many as of us as they can with this vaccination previous to this war?
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that number 6 is the number of a man. It's the number of a man. And when you get to understanding the number of the man, then you can make an assessment regarding those kind of things, whether that matches with that or not. It's the number of a man. If you read chapter 13, verse 18, it's the number of a man. Now, so then you can gauge, and investigate, whether it is that or not. But it's called Shishak, which means the place of the 6.
Well, they having it.
And if you look on the back of the dollar bill, over top of the head of the eagle is a 6-pointed star made up of a group of 5-pointed stars.
I don't have $1.
Yeah, look on and most of us don't have cash like that, man, because we use cards now. I believe I don't have any cash in my wallet at all, and never even missed.
I mean, I have some, but I use it. The last $3 I had, I went to this. No, I don't have. So you said on the back of $1, look at what now?
Okay. Look on the back of the dollar bill. You'll see over on the seal with the eagle, over top of his head is a 6-pointed star. And the 6-pointed star is made up of a group of 5-pointed stars that comprise this 6-pointed star over top of the head of the eagle. All of that's witchcraft. Wow, sorcery.
Something with the Masons to me.
Yeah, that's all. It's all the same territory. And that is what America scripturally represents biblically. That's what, and that's why it is going to go down last. So what that means is things are getting ready to change in America drastically.
Very much so. But I really feel like the Most High is giving us time because majority of Judah is here. Yeah.
Judah's here. A remnant are going to come out. They're going to hear the words of the messengers. There was a time when we keep referring to Ezekiel, 2 Chronicles 30, where the king Hezekiah sent out invitations to Israelites that were scattered abroad and said, come on back to Jerusalem. And for many Israelites that were abroad just laughed and didn't want to come back. But then there were some who heard the call and said, we're going to go back. And that's what's going to happen initially. Then the ones that wanted to stay here and continue to live like the heathen, Yah says in Ezekiel 20, that which comes to your mind shall not be that you say we will live as the heathen, will with fury pour it out, with an outstretched arm will I rule you, and I will bring you into the wilderness of the people. And there I will plead with you face to face, as I pleaded with your forefathers. So some of us don't want to go back. You know that.
Right,
a lot of us don't want to go back.
Right. They want to stay in Babylon. They want to go to McDonald's.
Yeah, they want to live like the heathen.
I'm just, they used to this lifestyle. Yep. That's true.
That's what Ezekiel said.
I was thinking it was going to be so supernatural because it's a lot of Israelites that is really trying to go to the land. They trying to get to Kenya, they trying to get to Tanzania, and they trying to get to Ghana, and they blocking that unless if you want to go to Ghana right now, you must take a vaccine.
I heard that. Somebody, I think it was either you or somebody else told me that.
Well, I was on a
I think it
class
was you.
it was me a couple weeks ago,
Yeah,
and I was
yeah.
just observing it, and it's a shame. It's a lot of Israelites that are making a mass exodus to the land, but now because they watching, the leaders watching and everything, and they are knowing all this stuff. They if you want to go now, you must take the vaccine. So I'm saying for us, it has has to be something supernatural because that's the mark of the beast for the most part, right?
Well, I don't see that vaccine is the mark of the beast, because once you take the mark of the beast, you lose your salvation. You can never be saved. And
Well,
that one hasn't been implemented yet.
Well, the scriptures say you can't buy or sell. Now, true, we can get online and buy and sell, but we're at like say a 3. They're escalating this. Like in my hometown, I can't go in any place there and buy anything unless I show a vaccine card. They made that in effect January the 3rd, and it's going to domino effect. So
it could be leading in that direction.
Right.
It's not there yet, though.
No, but all praises to the Most High. That to me, it's like he's making a way right now.
Yeah.
He's just like he made for our four Uncle Joseph when they were going into that 7-year famine. We have to prep and prepare in some sort of way. So all I'm saying is that us going back, I just took it to be something supernatural since we're not going to get on a plane.
Well, according to the record in Isaiah 18, we all couldn't fly back to Israel in planes anyway. It's not enough airplanes. We have to go back by ships, most of us.
Well,
Some of us
that would be
go
something.
by airplane, but most of us are going to be going by boat. I don't mind taking a cruise ship to Israel. I mean, Tom Joyner been taking a lot of us on cruise ships all along.
Just long as it's one way, Elder Dowie. Long as it's one way. I don't never want to see these stores again. They got this one. I have to say, to sit and see the destruction would be something. It would just,
Well, it's when you read chapter 18, it does talk about ships. And in Isaiah 60, it does talk about the ships of Tarshish coming to pick us up. And it says some of us will fly back. It's even described in Isaiah 60 that some of us will fly. Even before there were airplanes, they were talking about that. And it says some of us will be waiting on the ships of Tarshish, or the ships of the West. Yeah, so it's going to be worked out. But those messengers that are coming, they will be delegated with some really dangerous power they're going to inflict on America. Really horrendous disasters, just like Moses and Aaron did on Egypt. And they're coming with that kind of power. So there will be supernatural, like you're saying, Ema. There will be a supernatural deliverance there. It will be a sign and a witness to the world. It'll frighten America. That's coming.